The whole idea about this is to help people get actively involved in stopping and shutting down nuclear power plants, because there is more contamination on the planet than we could ever imagine. Just forget thinking about Fukushima. If you just dealt with Hanford, it's like I called the White House today and said, you know what, we don't need Iran to drop a bomb on us because Bechtel already did it. So, and in that vein, I have created some action lists. These are little handouts that kind of give you some highlights of some of the, just a few of the really gross negligence that's been perpetrated on our planet. And on the back are contact lists. We have the listing of the NRC, some of our elected officials. We put eWeb's number on there because we want every citizen in this county to call eWeb and tell them to stop using nuclear power, because we have 7% nuclear power coming into our homes right now. They don't need to use it, and we can make them stop if enough people called and said, no nuclear power in Lane County.
The Earth Day is coming up real soon.
That's right, Earth Day is coming up.
At eWeb.
And then on this side, there are some information. These are organizations that you can get involved with and find out a lot more information. Because I'm like you, honestly, I have not been after this very long. I had a nightmare in May about what I thought was Hanford. And I discovered, to my horror, that there are 3 nuclear power plants melted down in Fukushima, Japan, that have not been stopped. And they are pouring nuclear radioactivity into the Pacific Ocean at unprecedented rates. And instead of trying to manage it, Japan has decided to ignore it, and they are dumping the dirt into the Pacific Ocean and incinerating the contaminated dirt and debris, which makes it at least 100 times worse. Some people say 1,000 times worse. So, and I also printed out lists because most people don't know how to contact their senators and their representatives. This is a list of all the senators, and this is a list of all of the House of Representatives, and I would really suggest that all of you call them, at least call. I was told by Ron Wyden's office today that signing those online petitions don't do anything. They basically ignore them. So she suggested that we all write letters. She said letter writing, handwritten, not typed out, handwritten letters require a process, I guess, in their offices that they have to address them. And they get so few letters, she said it really makes an impact. I called up to demand that Bechtel be indicted because I think they have committed gross negligence and crimes against humanity, just what they did in Hanford. They built a 40-mile trench, 5 feet deep, unlined, and have been dumping radioactive contaminated fluid into it, unbeknownst to all of us. So it's a huge problem. So I thank you all for coming here. That's what motivated me to do this. When I read they were dumping water into the Pacific Ocean, they're now going to build a power pump station instead of putting it into barrels like we're used to seeing. And when I read that they're just planning on building a water pump station, for me the gloves came off. I contacted Kevin Blanch. He's a video blogger. I never met him before today. I found my way to YouTube, because YouTube is the only place you can get real information, ironically. Citizen journalists are out there giving information. And Kevin will speak more to that later. So I invited Kevin to come here. He actually wrote his thesis, it's called Post-Ignorance, and he can explain that. That's why I titled this event Post-Ignorance.
Future. just not the bully right's problem. This is the left as much to blame as the right. We've took this passive, soft, ignorant approach, and when Katrina exposed to the world the poverty of the United States, the last two social movements that we've had in this country, the teabagger radical right movement and Occupy itself. Occupy had everything it needed for an incredible social thing, but it exposed a tremendous amount of passive, soft, so-called tree-hugger grooming that has not worked. It has been a grotesque failure. And it exposed ignorance, pure ignorance. I was so outraged at this whole thing, wanted to understand why. I started out this, I'll discuss on how this path evolved for me. I grew up in Utah. As in Utah, when I was a boy, everybody knew what a downwinder was. We were the anti-nuclear capital of the world. I was an autistic kid. My father was a drafted United States Marine, an incredible man. I come from an incredible family. My uncle stood on Omaha Beach on D-Day. I grew up on a huge ranch out by the lake. He was a beautiful, incredible person. He was at Pendleton, combat ready, and they were human guinea pig. They were marched into the trenches in Nevada. They're called atomic veterans. He nearly died at the blast. Between 1951 and 1968, we had 300 open-air tests. Well, as different scientists started to write about this, Wallace Stegner was at the University of Utah at the time. I got to know him. Edward Abbey was hanging around there. I got to know him. I got to know all these environmentalists, and I was an environmentalist. And it was a passionate, intense subject matter there. Our beautiful, amazing governor, believe it or not, a liberal in Utah, a progressive, Scott Matheson, very beloved in the state. He died about the same age as me, exactly the disease that I have. He died of alpha leukemia. His elementary school class, he grew up in southern Utah, as they would go out and the teachers would let them watch it, they all passed young. We knew what downwinders were. We absolutely knew. We were anti-nuke as it gets. In 1982, the whole country organized. The biggest protest in the history of this country were 1982, the anti-nuclear marches, 1.2 million in Central Park alone. Our little university, our campus at Weber State, 4,000 student body, 15,000 protest. It was massive. So somehow we all forgot. And we were promised, when the nuclear thesis, nuclear power was evolving, we were promised not just in a handshake, we were promised in a contract, in legal contracts. This can't happen. A meltdown is impossible. It won't happen. It can't happen. It will never happen. And okay, what are we going to do with the spent fuel? What are we going to do with the waste? Yucca Mountain, Yucca Mountain, Yucca Mountain. Written into law. We're putting it underground like they did in Europe, in Norway. That's it was written into law by 1975. All the nuclear waste, because we all knew, anybody who knew anything about nuclear power knew that there's a byproduct, and we have to put it somewhere. So here comes 1975 around, they kick the can. Here comes to 1981, they kick the can. They just keep kicking the can, saying, oh, science will catch up. Science will catch up, and we'll find a place to put this nuclear waste. Oh, we'll find a way. Well, they found a way. The United States military became the industry. They bled themselves together, and it's called Moxie fuel. That's what number 4 is at Fukushima. It's Moxie fuel. Well, as this went along, my father, he was doing great. And I would tell this story about him being nuked. Well, Carol Gallagher wrote American Ground Zero. Richard Miller was at the University of Utah at the time in 1986, and he wrote Under the Cloud. And that book was heavily, heavily documented, and he built a map. He built a map, and he used the United States government data where it rained the next day. I don't know if anybody of you here know what a Fugo bomb is. Does anybody here know what a Fugo is? In 1940s, the Japanese, no one knew what the jet stream was. No one had a clue what the jet stream was. That's why the Doolittle run failed. There was a Japanese scientist in the military over there that he had found some writings of an ancient Japanese philosopher who had hypothesized this super wind stream up in the atmosphere that went many, many, many thousands of miles an hour. This guy says, well, let's take a chance. So he started building these hydrogen bombs. And they started launching these hydrogen bombs into the atmosphere. Just maybe they'll get to the United States and kill people, scare people. Well, they were getting here. Most people don't know this story. They were landing here. The United States spent a giant campaign as, in 1941, loose lips sink big ships. That campaign was massive. Well, they only killed all the Fugo bombs that were landing right here in Oregon. Well, right here, not far from Eugene, there was a pastor on a Sunday school in 1945 named Archie Mitchell. His wife, Elisa. They had their Sunday school out here in the woods. And the kids and his wife found one. Right as they're walking over to, I'm quoting this from the Seattle Times, said he yelled at them. Right as he yelled at them, it went off and it killed them. It's so ironic that this comes back. When Fukushima melted down, my father died in the 90s of leukemia. I was heartbroken. I was outraged. My uncle was at the Pentagon at the time, high brass. He says, Kevin, even I run into block doors. So I had money in those days. I was a derivative trader. I had a Wall Street career going. I was so heartbroken and so outraged. I took on the Justice Department, took them head on. I sued them over and over and over for these classified block documents. None of the atomic veterans, 40,000, and they were not cleanup crews. They were men in trenches, human guinea pig, their finest. They were the original special forces. None of them got medals, none of them got money, none of them got death benefits, none of them got nothing. All of them died of leukemia and cancer. All of them. The data finding, so I sued and I sued and sued. I'd tell this story to people and they'd look at me like I had 3 eyeballs, literally. Well, finally, it started under the Freedom of Information Act, it started to come out. You can go around YouTube and you can watch the pictures and the video. It's common. Carol Gallagher wrote American Ground Zero about this. By the way, she's alive and well. She lives in Colorado. I'm in communication with her nearly every day. I was outraged. So I went on this tirade, this cursed spite was I born to ever set her right. I call it the country and western version of Hamlet. So I went after him and I went after him and I turned myself into an expert on nuclear fallout. I already knew a lot about it because of the likes of Wallace Stegner, the likes of Edward Abbey, the likes of Utah Downwinders, the death of our governor, Scott Matheson. I knew that we were the autism capital of the world. I was autistic. I'm still autistic. I've learned to cope with it. I knew that we were the cancer capital of the world in Utah, and I wanted to understand why. And then I started to realize it was the 300 open-air tests in Nevada, so I dug in. And all this data, people say, oh, the data's not there, the science is not there, that nuclear fallout is perfectly correlated with cancer. The data is there. It is hiding in plain sight. So we go along, 1982, all the protests and the marches. Well, here comes Chernobyl. Oh, this can't happen. It will never happen. We cannot have a meltdown. Chernobyl is the best IAEA conspiracy 1% secret. It makes the bankster scam look like church mice. The IAEA, the World Health Organization, who is the IAEA, the IAEA via the United Nations has been hijacked and kidnapped by the 1%. The nuclear industry, they are the same group of people. They own who's. They are the IAEA. They are the media. Chernobyl, my work, the new book that came out a couple years ago, their work, in the direct contact estimates it killed 1 million. My work estimates that it killed 40 million people. People don't know. On day 87 of Chernobyl, which Gorbachev really was an amazing humanitarian trying to back out nuclear, and Reagan agreed. That's the only good thing that I can ever say about Reagan. They agreed, and they were backing out nuclear. Nuclear was done in this country. 85% of Americans in 1986, 85% were anti-nuclear anything. They wanted them gone because they lied to us about storing the fuel. And people in America understood. They lied to us, they lied to us. There's nowhere to put it. They're shoving it in nooks, crannies, caves, everywhere. Clear back in 86, we understood this. What happened? The IAEA spent $2 billion in a media campaign to downplay Chernobyl. Chernobyl was, the entombment of Chernobyl was the greatest construction project in world history. 580,000 men. In the Battle of Chernobyl, that brilliant award-winning documentary in 2006 that came out that heavily documented this, she says in that documentary, the worst thing to come out of the core meltdown at Chernobyl was not cesium, was not plutonium, it was lies. People don't know the truth about Chernobyl. If they knew the truth about Chernobyl, there would be no nuclear power industry here. So here we go on and we go on and we go on. We just keep kicking the can, shoving nuclear waste at Hanford in tanks that were built for 20 years, when by law, they were supposed to have triple layer tanks, written into law. But there is no wrong or right, there's only popular opinion. White collar crime, these laws we don't enforce. So we've shoved this nuclear waste. My numbers show 252. There's 104 nuclear plants in the United States. How many people here know that the spent fuel is stored on site in the plants and how it's stored? Yeah, you know, people are starting to wake up to it. How is it stored? It's just sitting there on shelves in cooling pools. None of these reactors, not one single one of them, was ever built for that. So that alone is enough. So we go along, you know, we're all doing our thing. We're fighting as environmentalists. We're fighting as anti-nuclear. We get no traction. We fall on deaf ears completely. I had been working on my PhD called post-ignorance. I wanted to try to understand, is America really as ignorant as I think they are in knowledge, and why? I'm an economist. So I started doing all my studies and breaking down, blah, 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 I was going along, and that's how my YouTube site started. It was part of my PhD. Well, first the BP oil spill happens. I'm outraged at it. I go crazy. Well, my whole mantra is that the left has been way too, their knowledge is there, a lot of their knowledge, and I believe their intentions as far as right here in Eugene, I mean, you're the organic food capital of the world. This is where this thing should organically grow out of this movement, just by geography alone, straight across from Fukushima. But I was going on, why? Boom. Fukushima happens. I was laying on my couch that morning, and when it happened, I know, as an anti-nuclear, I know that none of these units are set up, none are set up to handle anything more than about a 7.7 earthquake. And the idealism that somehow the tsunami caused the Fukushima disaster is total bullshit. Those cores fractured on impact. As soon as the containment vessels cannot handle, they fractured. And when they're fractured, it is contained madness in those cores. As soon as it's fractured, that genie is out of the bottle and released. So it happens. I was watching, it changed it was like an epiphany. It changed my whole life. I went crazy about it. Started ranting and raving and carrying on, going crazy, trying to wake people up on my YouTube site. This is going to give you leukemia. This is going to give you leukemia. This is going to give you cancer. This is going to give you cancer. I called it in detail from day one. People argued me, including Arnie Gunderson, including the IA. They were all over my YouTube saying, Kevin, you don't know what you're talking about. Oh, really? As we look back, my accuracy is Cassandra-like. It's impeccable. So it goes along, and I knew that the propaganda machine of Chernobyl would kick into place, but I thought, no way, not this time, they're not going to get away with it. Let's remember when Fukushima happened, the plume goes out of the buildings. That plume was so heavily contaminated, the wind was blowing out. The wind was blowing out. CNN's over there. Here's Anderson Vanderbilt and Sanjay Gupta over there. They're over there, and they've got this character from MIT, this Jim Walsh, is their expert. I'm watching every day, everybody, the whole world's watching intensely. You know, what should we do, what should we do? Anderson Cooper himself's on there. What should I do, what should I do, what should I do? And I'm yelling, get out, get out, get out. Well, it's ironic. The wind was blowing out. The second the wind was shifted, they knew the weather report was going to shift back over Tokyo. They came home. They came home. The IAEA, TEPCO made the decision on day 3. And I have the tapes from the NRC. Whistleblowers have given them to me. I have them. You can hear them talking right here, our own NRC, saying, this is 3 full core. They knew it was 3 4 cold meltdowns. Everybody was saying, no, it's 1, and it's not even a full blown. They knew it. The NRC themselves, their own words are talking, it's full 3 blown out core, and we would automatically have a 70-mile back. I have the tapes. I have them. And so they knew. So it's going on. Well, the IAEA made the decision to pawn it off on us, on the world. They knew their only hope was that steam, as it continues, it goes over Tokyo, to push it into the Pacific Ocean. So they started dumping water on it. And as people dumping water, they'll just catch the water and redistribute. They had no bladder system. They have no bladder, and I knew that. As soon as they were putting water, they had no clue. They were pouring water over it, and the water continually just to pour over the reactor. By the way, the reactors, as they're melting down, they get stronger and stronger. And so a lot of people compare it to a tea bag. But the comparison is not accurate because if it's it is a tea bag, but the tea bag gets stronger with time. The tea bag is stronger today than it was on day 10. Stronger today than it was yesterday. It gets stronger and stronger. It's full blown out China syndrome. On Balco, as I say, there are 3 full core, as I reported right off the get, and everybody argued with me. Number 4, everybody's like, how can number 4 possibly have this much spent fuel in it? That's enough spent fuel to run those group of reactors for 200 years. How's it? Well, it's simple. And it's been exposed yesterday in Helen's beautiful, I don't know if any of you guys watched Helen's Symposium, Caldicott's, and it was exposed in there as Kevin from Beyond Nuclear did that brilliant lecture, and he showed the tie between the Japanese nuclear industry and the CIA. He exposed it in detail, exactly the United States military working with it. It's moxide fuel laying there. Well, people don't realize that number 4, people say if it falls, it'll be the biggest catastrophe. It's already fallen. A lot of those spent fuel pools in number 4 went empty day 1. When a spent fuel pool goes empty, it is full blown out fission. China syndrome is nothing but a contemporized word for nuclear, not nuclear fusion, nuclear fission. They're 2 very different things. It's a natural phenomenon. The world China syndrome was contemporized via the movie, which is ironic. The movie came out in '79, right coincide with the 3 Mile Island by coincidence. And the hypothesis that gamma rays and fission will burn all the way through the Earth to China, which is geographically inaccurate. If it was to burn all the way through the Earth, it would end up somewhere near Australia. I've come up with South America syndrome as far as TEPCO. So what happens is when they're dry, they fuse together and they cause nuclear fission, which has been turned into China syndrome, which none of us really know the byproduct, but we know it's not good, and we know it creates gamma rays. And we know gamma rays are the killer of all killer. And we know that this is going on. TEPCO's own words, this is TEPCO's words, as far as the cleanup. We are relying on technology that is yet to be developed. That's their own words as far as the cleanup. They have no clue. The whole industry has no clue by law. This is illegal. These are crimes against humanity. These are the grotesquest crimes ever against humanity. So they push the water over. Well, the water's been pouring into the Pacific for 731 days now. Billions and billions of gallons of water. Billions of gallons. The water that they've caught is a tiny drop to the water that's run over. These vessels on the outside are not waterproof. It runs over them continuously into the Pacific Ocean. And the Pacific Ocean is not a bathtub. This hypothesis somehow that, we got tracer studies of the salmon. In Japan, we have the Japanese current. The Japanese current, Fukushima runs up like this. It's a very, very swift river.
So I invited Kevin to come here. He actually wrote his thesis, is called Post-Ignorance, and he can explain that. And that's why I titled this event Post-Ignorance. Right now. They don't need to use it, and we can make them stop if enough people called and said, no nuclear power in Lane County.
The Earth Day is coming up real soon.
That's right, Earth Day is coming up.
At eWeb.
And then on this side, there are some information. These are organizations that you can get involved with and find out a lot more information. Because I'm like you, honestly, I have not been after this very long. I had a nightmare in May about what I thought was Hanford. And I discovered, to my horror, that there are 3 nuclear power plants melted down in Fukushima, Japan, that have not been stopped. And they are pouring nuclear radioactivity into the Pacific Ocean at unprecedented rates. And instead of trying to manage it, Japan has decided to ignore it, and they are dumping the dirt into the Pacific Ocean. And the whole idea about this is to help people get actively involved in stopping and shutting down nuclear power plants, because there is more contamination on the planet than we could ever imagine. Just forget thinking about Fukushima. If you just dealt with Hanford, it's like I called the White House today and said, you know what, we don't need Iran to drop a bomb on us because Bechtel already did it. So, and in that vein, I have created some action lists. These are little handouts that kind of give you some highlights of some of the, just a few of the really gross negligence that's been perpetrated on our planet. And on the back are contact lists. We have the listing of the NRC, some of our elected officials. We put eWeb's number on there because we want every citizen in this county to call eWeb and tell them to stop using nuclear power because and crimes against humanity, just what they did in Hanford. They built a 40-mile trench, 5 feet deep, unlined, and have been dumping radioactive contaminated fluid into it, unbeknownst to all of us. So it's a huge problem. So I thank you all for coming here. That's what motivated me to do this. When I read they were dumping water into the Pacific Ocean, they're now going to build a power pump station instead of putting it into barrels like we're used to seeing. And when I read that they're just planning on building a water pump station, for me the gloves came off. I contacted Kevin Blanch. He's a video blogger. I never met him before today. I found my way to YouTube, because YouTube is the only place you can get real information, ironically. Citizen journalists are out there giving information. And Kevin will speak more to that later. Incinerating the contaminated dirt and debris, which makes it at least 100 times worse. Some people say 1,000 times worse. So, and I also printed out lists because most people don't know how to contact their senators and their representatives. This is a list of all the senators, and this is a list of all of the House of Representatives, and I would really suggest that all of you call them, at least call. I was told by Ron Wyden's office today that signing those online petitions don't do anything. They basically ignore them. So she suggested that we all write letters. She said letter writing, handwritten, not typed out, handwritten letters require a process, I guess, in their offices that they have to address them. And they get so few letters, she said it really makes an impact. I called up to demand that Bechtel be indicted because I think they have committed gross negligence